Hello everyone, this is Christian Lexicon Interactive, and by the time that we are done with this video we will not have anything very exciting. We will have though defined a form group, so we'll have our first component here, which is, like I said, a form group, which is the wrapper around a form and any input elements. We'll have also created our first control, which is just an input, which inside of its template will contain a div and a label and input. We will have set it up so that the user through the template can define what the label should be, and also can decide what the type of the input should be. And the first thing that we're going to do is to sort of clean up some of the styles that we created in the previous video, starting everything up. I'm going here to the forms here. We have a style in the form examples component. Yes, so we're just going to remove this main nav style here, save. And I think we had one other style in the basic example component. As a matter of fact, we're just going to get rid of the H1 altogether. So that takes care of removing the styles. Alright, so now we're ready to start or begin here. And the first thing that we are going to do is to create a form group component. And I'm going to right click on the forms and I'm going to choose add new item. Back to our text. Create a xc-form.group.component. Alright, and I intended to make the template first, but it doesn't matter. Alright, so let's make our component. And so I basically usually start everything with xc-whatever. You can choose to name things whatever you want. So form group, and we'll make it xc form group. Alright. Let me go ahead and make the template so what I say next will make sense. So we'll come up here, add new item, and what do we call it? xc form-group.component.pug. Actually, while I'm thinking about it too, we're not going to need any styles, at least for a while, on this, so we're going to remove the style reference. So we'll come back to the template here. All I'm going to have, at least for right now, inside the template is a form, and we need to, so it's going to be bind. This is an Angular property here. So we have form group. So it comes from the reactive forms module, and we're going to bind that to something called T group. And because this component, the template for this component, is going to wrap the components for the controls, we're going to have to include an ng dash content here. We'll save that. Now we'll go back to the component here, and to start with I want to make a private read-only underscore T group. It's going to be something that's not defined yet, form group, and equals no. We have to import that, so import, that's from Angular forms. So now we can get our form group. Perfect. So I've started doing this. I'm not sure if I'll continue, or I'm kind of liking it. What I'm doing here is basically saying that, well, what am I saying here? So I'm preferencing the for or the field, and we'll also have this getter. Let's do this. Private get T group, and that's just going to return this dot T group. Perfect. So I basically started putting this T on the front here to let me know that this variable, or in this case a getter, is being used within the template. So that way we can have the private visibility accessor, the modifier there, and then I know that even though I'm not calling it within the component, it's actually being referenced somewhere else. And actually do want to call it in this case in the constructor. So we'll do constructor, or I'm going to use the field here. So we'll have the T group, and that's going to be equal to a new form group. So that requires an object, basically usually has the form controls, but for now, or not for now, what we'll do is add in an empty object. So we're creating our form group, which again is being accessed through the getter in the component of our form group. All right. So now, to make things a little easier for us to deal with importing things all over the place, what I'm going to do is create a couple of other forms within the forms folder here. Choose add new item. So this one we're going to call forms.core.ts. So this thing is going to hold reference to all of, say, the core components, the components the thing does not work with without, or interfaces or enums that I want to have access to in different places. So at this point, we're just going to re-export the form that we just created. Oops, making my own notation. So that was an XC form-group.component. Save that. And so this thing is just going to, like I said, export the things that we absolutely need for things to run. I'm also going to create another file here, say new, and we're going to call that forms.index.ts. And this thing is going to export everything not in the examples folder. So this one's an export star from just the ones, or just the one that we created now. And there's the error there. All right, so now we're good to go on those exporting. So now we're going to want to include these things in our forms in our examples. So we're going to go into the examples here. We already had this form-examples.index, and it's taking care of the exporting related to the examples. What we're just going to come in here and do is we're going to re-export, and this time we'll just export the forms index. So we want to get everything into our examples, and now we can come into our module definition for examples. I like to keep this one. I'm going to have this import here. This one is related to the examples, and we're going to do, it's going to import from the exact same file. Oops. .index, and what we're doing, XC form group components. Now we have to put this in our declarations. All right, so we are getting there. Don't know why I didn't do it previously, but let's go back to the forms.core, or forms core component here, or forms.core.ts file. And I said this is going to hold references to things that we need everywhere. And what we're about to do on that form group component is add an input so that people, or an Angular input, so that the user can specify, in this case, the name of the form. But I want to have a way to say, to throw an error if an input is not set. So if an input is left being undefined or null, I want a way to say, hey, I expect this thing to have a value, and this is an error if it doesn't. So we're going to create a function inside of our core file here. And so we'll say export function and spell it right. And we're going to call this throw missing input error. Perfect. All right. So now I'm going to take in, so I said we want to throw this error if the input is null or undefined. So we're going to pass in input, we're going to say it can be anything. And if, let's see, what type of input equals undefined, or input equals null, or let's do it the other way. Not equal, not equal. So then we'll just return. All right, so if it is null or undefined, we do want to add in some information or throw an error. And to do that, I'm going to pass in another thing, tag name, which is a string. We're going to pass in a message, which is a string, and input example, which is also a string. Just barely fitting over there. We actually don't need this. Okay, so now let's just create our message. And actually, I'm just going to copy this in instead of redoing it here. So we'll use the template string here. And so I'll just format a message. So I'm going to have a tag name here. We'll have a message. And then what I want to do is, give like a little example of how to use it. All right, and we'll see this in action here shortly. So now we just need to put our fingers in the right spot. New error and pass in the message. We'll save that. And actually, when I went back to redo this, or what I was working on and preparing for this, I went ahead and it's not a return, throw. I couldn't quite remember exactly how to use this, so we actually have a JS doc here we'll add to this so I can get a tooltip for next time. Alright, so let's put this to use, and we go back into our form group component. Alright, we're going to define an input, so we import that from Angular Core, and I think that I like to put the inputs at the top here. So we'll have an input. It's going to be name and private read only, and name, which is a string, starts out null. So now we need to check for it, and to check for it, we'll come back up here. We're going to import after view init. We'll say our component implements that interface. Of course going to complain because we are not currently doing it. ng after view init void, oops, and now and we still can't do it because we need to import other things. So let's import, and we'll import that from the, what did I call it now? I've already forgotten. Forms.core, and we want our error function, throw missing error input, and we'll say throw missing error, and we want to throw that if this name has not been defined, and I want to say the tag name, so xe form group said something. So let's see what the somethings were. We'll just copy this in. So all I did was say the name of the form group must be set, and then passed in, name equals name, and we'll see that, like I said, in action. Actually, you'll probably see it. Well, no, because I copied and put this thing in here. For the second, let's just remove this. So if we go back to our console here, now we see that the we see a template error, not the error that I was expecting to see. What's our problem here? What is our problem? Things are supposed to be working without error. So ng content, does it work with our form group? Yes. Oh, this form group is not what we're trying to do. All right, idiot. So we're not actually looking in, it's not like the form group itself. What we want to do is go to our basic example, Should have done it to see, make sure everything was working to begin with, but what we want to say is XC form group. So we just get rid of that H1 XC form group, go back to our browser, and now I am puzzled as to why we are not seeing the error. Passing in the name. Let's look on the core. So input, if it's not equal undefined, oops, not or. And helps if you learn how to program. So now it looks like we're getting our error. So if we come back up here, so the name of the form group must be set, and we have a little HTML looking thing here going on telling us that we have to specify the name. So now we'll go back to the example. Put our parentheses, say name, and just to stick with the notes, I called this basic form group. Save it, back to the browser, just because I'm lazy, I want to see no errors, so we're good to go there. So we have a form group. It's not much good without any components, so let's close that up. Before we even try to do anything, we're gonna add some components here, and of course I've already tested it out previously. It apparently doesn't stop me from making mistakes anyway, but so what we're going to do is start defining some controls. So I'm going to create a folder called controls within the forms folder, and inside of that we're going to have an input folder. But for the moment we'll go back to the controls folder that we created, and we're going to create a couple files here. Say new, and this we're going to call xccontrol.ts. Alright, and for this one we're going to import the input Angular core and input, and so we'll export an abstract class called xccontrol, and we'll put the input to use. So the input will be a label. So we'll turn back to our private read-only label and equals null. So I did mention the the toll T thing, and I had previously been putting it on these things as well, and then no implicit any. I've decided that if it has an input decorator on here, it's pretty redundant to put the T on there, and obviously has to deal with the template anyway. But I don't want to have access to these like I said in the previous, so we'll put a getter on here. So private get T label, and this will just return this dot label. So we're good to go here. And we're gonna create another file within the forms. Oh no, within the controls folder here. So add new item. This one's an XC form control. And from this one, it's not really anything typing going on, so we're going to cheat and do this. Actually, we're going to fail because I forgot to do something already. So we'll return to our forms.core.ts file. Things do not, or I think it's pretty core, that component that we were dealing with there, or the XC control. So we're going to export that from here. So that's in controls, XC control. And since I've already defined it, we'll go ahead and do it while we're here. We're going to export from controls/XC form-control. Perfect. Should now get rid of our error here. And you might wonder, why do we need two abstract classes? And it basically just boils down or relates to how we're going to deal with radio buttons later on. Why we're using two. Go ahead and save that or close that. And I've already done the exporting in the core. So now we're ready to create our first control. Already in the input, or in this input folder. We'll choose add new item. I'm going to create the xc-input-component.pug. So we'll start off with just a div. We'll put a little form control group class on there, and we'll put a label on it. And the label we're going to say ngIf equals, and this is we've already defined it. All of our controls will inherit from, one way or the other, things will inherit either from XC control or XC form control, either way. Since form control inherits from XC control, we'll have a label. So if there's a label defined, then we want to show it, or the double curly braces here. And then we need an input, and then this one's going to be specific to this control, and we'll define it here in a minute, but we'll have a way to say, have the user specify which type of input it is, with the understanding that these inputs are going to be basically string related inputs. So text, I think date pickers and those kind of things are all strings. It's not going to be checkboxes or radio buttons. They'll all have, or they both have their own control. So to round things out, let's just create a style folder. So this one, xc input.component.scss. For the moment, it's just going to be blank. We'll put the class in there. And let's create our actual component here. So it's a shame when my notes jump around when I hit a button. So xc input.component.ts. And we scroll back down to where it's supposed to be. All right, so now let's just define a component here. So xc-input and xc input. Perfect. So now we mentioned in the components, the label, of course, is dealt with. Well, actually, it's not. Let's go ahead and deal with that. So we'll say import from. What we want to import from is the core, so it's forms.core. And XC form control. So now we have a label on there. Well, keep doing it, then we'll have a label. Now we have a label. And in the component or the template, we also have to deal with this type. So let's take care of that. So we'll have input, and no, of course, helps. All of these input or imports, input, perfect. It's going to be called type, and private, read only, and t type, which is a string, equals null. Now we'll do a little bit more on this one here, because let's do the same getter though. We'll get a get. T type. Now what we want to say is that we'll say return. So we'll say type of this dot t type if that's equal to undefined, or this dot t type equals null. Then what I want to return is text. Otherwise, return whatever it is. Once again, typing 101. All right, so like I said, we're going to default to text, otherwise whatever the user has specified. And if you were thinking to yourself, we need to add in another index file, I would say you are correct. So we're going to come in here to the controls, or the controls folder here. We're going to add new item. And we're going to call it controls.index.ts. And we'll just export the only control that we have so far. It's located in the input folder, c-input.component. Perfect. Probably should round it out here, and I'd have to change all my notes and such. Yeah, leave it alone. All right, What else do we want to do? So we now have that. Let's go into the form examples index. So this thing's supposed to be exporting everything. So let's export from, we'll just do that controls index that we just created. So control/controls.index. Actually, that was a form examples one. And I did not want to put that there. Never mind. Close that. What I wanted was the forms.index. There we go. Export star from. And now we are going to get that from input/xc. Nope. Controls. Index. Go away, squiggly line. One day. Do one thing wrong and everything goes off the rails. So controls index, everything works fine now. And we're already importing this forms index in the forms example, so of course we don't need to do that again. So what we'll do is go back into the form examples module, and now we can hopefully get our input component here. Perfect. Let's declare it. Input component module's good to go. Let's return back to our basic example. So the basic example template, the PUG file, and actually input. Let's go ahead and put a label on this thing. Whoops. Input. Save that. Go back to our browser. Refresh everything. See that there's no errors, thankfully. We have our input here. It has the input label. We can see that it's defaulting to text. If we go back, we say type equals password. Save it. Back to the browser, take a look. So type is equal to password there. So we have everything up and running. Leave it as a text box for now. So we've done a little bit of work. We've done a bit of infrastructure work so we can add things more quickly to our examples. And we have our form group and our input going on, and we'll have to decide here and see what we do next. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. I know that your time is valuable. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel and click the thumbs up button, as well as share the video with your friends. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below. And once again, thank you, and I will talk to you in the next video.